So welcome everyone to the Nordic PropTech quarterly webinar once again. And I'm super happy to have you all on board. Just very quickly, what is the Nordic PropTech Initiative? The aim for us is to market Nordic PropTechs globally and to create a network over the different country borders up here in the Nordics, especially when we potentially go to events on the global scene and so on. We've been here since 2017, and it's very much run as a side hustle, combining with the normal day job for me. And we are not an association. I'm super happy to have each association in the Nordic region attending this call like we normally do, and that's great. So before we join, maybe just ask you two questions I ask quite a lot, is that who are actually listening to this event? And roughly 69%, roughly, I mean, in a year, are from the Nordics, which means that roughly 1/3 are non-Nordic people listening to this call on average. And quite a few from both UK and US and the rest of the world, which I'm super happy, because what we try to do at this event is both to give insights to the people up here in the Nordics, because if you're living in one of the countries in, it's quite hard to follow what's happening in the PropTech market in another Nordic country. Sounds weird, but that's how it works. And also to inform and hopefully market Swedish and Norwegian and Finnish and Danish PropTechs on the global scene. So I'm super happy to have 1/3 of the attendees from all around the globe. And roughly 40% are PropTech companies, so attending this event. And super happy to have 1/3 actually being end users, so the users of the PropTech, and that's really good, because that means that you're really forward-leaning. And I think especially that target group will have an extra interest in James, our guest speakers, part of the portion today. Before that, and before we join into additional slides about the market, let's go around the table on the panel here. So I have 4 people from each country in the Nordics. So let's start with Norway. Who are you, Henrik, and what's your background?
So my name is Henrik. I founded the PropTech Norway, the Norwegian PropTech Association, a few years ago now, and also been a Nordic director for WeWork, working with establishing WeWork in Northern Europe. Now I'm a lawyer in a law firm, as I'm trained to be, but I also run quite a few PropTech projects on the side. So that's my take on it.
Welcome, Henrik. And from Denmark, Jakob.
Thank you very much, Magnus, for inviting. I'm Jakob Stoumann from PropTech Denmark, where I'm the hub director. I've been on this journey with PropTech Denmark since almost the beginning, not the entire beginning, but since early spring 2020, when just after PropTech Denmark actually launched officially as an association here in Denmark. So thank you very much for inviting Magnus.
And now it gets slightly complicated, because our man from Sweden, Roger, is actually calling in from UK.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Magnus. Founder of PropTech Sweden. We started end of 2019. Been in the real estate for like 10 years. Did smartest building, South Sweden smartest building 2016. So been in the game for a while. Thank you.
And finally, Tasha from Finland.
Hey everyone, I'm a co-founder and community director for PropTech Finland. The movement started more or less in 2017, but officially our starting date is March 2019. We are helping Finnish startups to be known and visible for international clients and investors and the world.
And happy birthday, Tasha.
Tack så mycket.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Are you 21 again?
Well, never older than 14, I guess.
So then also we all have a guest on the line, and this is not an ordinary guest. It's one of the seems old guys in PropTech, if I read it correctly. So James, welcome. Who are you?
Thanks, Magnus. Well, I mean, firstly, thank you for having me on. So I'm one of the co-founders of Unissu, which is a trusted PropTech procurement platform. And I think many of you who are probably watching this will have seen the journey that Unissu have been on for the last 3.5 years. And, you know, we've done the classic startup testing and trialing and seeing where we go. But ultimately, you know, we are there to help the PropTechs find customers, and actually those 33% of the Nordic PropTech Initiative people who are the end users, you know, we're there to help them identify those users. And I've been on that journey in PropTech for years and years, traveling all around the world, speaking at conferences, trying to understand and ultimately help the industry evolve and adapt. And I'm going to be presenting a small piece today, which hopefully is actually, I know it's actually very unique for the sorts of things that I talk about, but I hope it's there to help those of you in the PropTech sector understand the property industry a lot more and where it is at the minute and its current position. So I'll have a little piece at the end of this, which hopefully will be very informative for you.
Perfect, James. Looking forward. But let's start with a quick overview of the market, and then we will go through each local country. What has happened during the last few months, and what trends do you see per country? So very quick overview. I mean, the market is still super hot, or is it? So let's start if it's still hot. This was a graph I found in a blog post by UK-based PropTech VC firm Pi Labs. That was an excellent piece, and they had this graph showing both the total numbers in sterling pounds invested in PropTech companies, but most interesting could be the red part of the graph, which is the European numbers. And you can see there was a slight decline in 2020, but it almost doubled in 2021, which is obviously a great sign that the market is hot. And if we continue on that journey, we could see that especially the Nordic region and well, Europe in general is really start to grow into the larger markets like US when it comes to raise capital and growth. And that is especially true for the Nordics. There's no question about it that we had high absolute numbers here before, but the growth, like, which you can see in the right-hand side, I think all the 4 Nordic countries are in the top 1 there in growth when it comes to VC investments. And that is obviously good news for all PropTech companies out there looking for financiers. But is it hot, the market? Well, that's a good question. If we look at the broader cloud index from Nasdaq, it looks amazing, over 800% in growth during those last couple of, I think it's 7 years. However, if we switch that to the last 6 months, it's not looking that good, is it? So it's been that we all know about for sure a decrease in the public stocks. The big question now in the market is obviously how will this affect the private market, and especially for us up here in the Nordics. And I still think it's to be determined when you have more facts on the table. But there's no question that the investors will be more cautious when they start to look into companies. I think you can say that without taking it to extended broad point on it. On the other hand, we have ESG, and I really would like to share this Twitter update from James Dice, which is a great person to follow from Nexus Labs. He has a great newsletter and podcast about connected properties. So you can read this, and I'll be silent for a few seconds. I really think this is something that's going to happen extremely much. The focus on ESG is so many different levels and verticals, but as an overall trend, this will for sure affect the PropTech market. And you can already see a massive increase. And when it comes to climate tech and urban tech and so on, and impact funds, the scope will broaden a lot, but there's no question that the entire climate tech startup is growing like crazy. So this is a graph from a report from PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, that did the climate tech report. And the question though, are we actually focused on the right thing? This graph is from the same report, and it shows the share of global emissions by different areas. So the black part of that graph, 16%, is about mobility and so on. And built environment at the bottom, according to this report, is 21% share of global emissions back in 2016. And the next graph show where are those investments done. So micro-mobility stands for 60% of the global emissions, but has attracted 61% of all the VC money. One may argue that maybe is too many electric kick bikes out there, even from an investment perspective. I love those, by the way, but maybe there are too many different suppliers that have reached this point by attracting a lot of investment capital. And at the bottom, you can see that those 21% that the built environment stands for, according to this report, only has attracted 4% of investments. Obviously, if you do investment, you care not just about the impact, but also the potential financial gain from it. So it's slightly more complicated, but there's no question that there will be a need for more impact investments in the built environment if we should reach the targets. And what does it mean for PropTech more particularly? I really think this will be something that's caused the droplet that caused the overflow, that, like we say in Swedish. I think the English proper would be, it was the final straw. And I can already now see that for sure, that there are so many quite small reports and dashboards that are asked by the LPs or the board in a real estate company that is really hard to do manually nowadays, and that will force investments to a more broader PropTech investments within the firm, because now they finally really need to create a data structure, know what properties they own, have those properties online, and so on and so on. So I think this ESG reporting will be the final push for PropTech to be really mainstream. And there are quite a few competitions and so on, and I just give you one example. This is the New York that has a PropTech challenge about carbon net zero. So I really want to shout out to all the Nordic PropTechs in this field that this is a competition you for sure should look into if it's suitable for your company. Going forward, so that was just a 10,000 meters overview. So let's drill into deals, fundings, and news. So what has happened on the Nordic PropTech market the last couple of months? So let's start with Finland. Tasha, what has happened?
Thank you, Magnus. And building on the ESG theme, Finland is quite committed to low carbon emissions and changing the life to the better, more sustainable way, and invest heavily in ESG. We have Business Finland, which is a public sector organization, and they will invest 32 million in low carbon built environment projects. It started last year and will continue until the end of the next year. So anybody who has good ideas in low carbon emission projects can apply for that funding from the state. Another good thing which we noticed that digitalization is speeding up. And last year, according to Dearsley report, 1/3 of transactions, residential property sales, they were done digitally, and that's a good news. Seems that people are more and more online in every possible respect. And actually, in terms of the transactions on real estate market last year was record breaking. It was 7 billion euros last year in the transactions, and including almost 1 billion from the foreign investors. So people from other countries are interested about building new properties. There will be less construction projects compared to the previous year. The number of permissions dropped by 11%. If this market trends effect or not, I'm not sure, but many members of our community, many PropTech startups, they go international. Basically, most Finnish PropTechs are born international. I will just mention a few guys. R8 Technologies entered 5 new countries during the last year. Bitwards, they partnered up with Certega and Securitas, and they started international expansion quite actively. G-Builder enters UK markets. They hired Mark Witherspoon as their advisor and planning really heavy expansion. And Hyperion is going Germany and Central Europe. Hyperion Robotics also started the project with Iberdrola. So basically, all our members want to go bring their innovation to other markets. On funding side, we have 2 rather big deals to mention. Builder had raised $1 million in the seed round, and that's exceptional for the seed round in Finland. And now, yeah, you have this nice green walls on the photo. They raised recently 7 million euros for the global expansion as well. They will bring more higher quality air to every space inside, which is extremely important in this pandemic times. I think now people are more sensitive to the quality of the air. And that was the good news from Finland. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasha. Sorry, I was too quick here to switch the screen. So over to Roger, Sweden.
Thank you, Tasha, for that, and thank you, Magnus, for arranging this webinar. Well, we have a lot of Finnish companies coming to Sweden, so that's good news. We looking forward to have a better collaboration with Finland. When it comes to Sweden, of course, the pandemic, we have a company called Flowscape in Sweden who's doing like member booking, booking rooms and desk booking and so on, and they're just taking wins after wins after wins. So I think that's a really interesting company to follow in general, the public also. To follow their journey, and we had a discussion with them, success story last year, talking about some deals they've done in Australia, totally online. So they sell the product and then educate them and everything from Sweden down to Australia. So it's a really good company in general to just follow and learn from. So I think that's a good thing in general. What we more see also is a lot of partnership in the industry. More and more companies, investors want to have the 360. So we see the latest, the big one last year was the BLQ Invest and Vasakronan. Vasakronan is one of the biggest real estate player in Sweden. They started a company Hydda together to see the more 360 to go to the real estate with a bigger portfolio than just one company. So follow that. And then we had Riksbyggen, who invested in Sportscale, who's doing some drones and 3Ds and so on. So it's just a clear message to the industry in general in Sweden that the big players is really going ahead now. So that's great. But also what we see, especially follow our members on LinkedIn, we can see it's a really big, a lot of real estate players like in the small and medium side real estate owners that start to invest in PropTech. And that's great news for general, because that means that the tail of the first early adapters is going down. So I think it's in general it's amazing, and it's amazing to just follow all our members on LinkedIn and see all the small deals coming in. I think it's created a really big awareness of the industry and where we're headed. When we see in general, we see, I mean, there is quite a lot of money coming in to the Swedish company. We had just one of our members, Vinden, they put in 3 million euros from a global VC, VNV Global, to expand their business. We had, again, we see Compare IT as a smaller player, but they bought another PropTech company to have a bigger portfolio. And yesterday, that was not so much about the last quarter. Big news was the Tessin. They just got Dynamic Credit as a partner. I think Magnus, you know about that also, but was it about 30 million euros in funding to start investing? So it's just great to see what's going on. And the other thing we see is the partnership. When we started this association for 2 years ago, every company wanted to own their own business and go their own line. But now we see so much partnership between PropTech members. A lot of people said, we're working with them now, we're working with them, and you can just follow it. So it's just amazing to see. So I think the associations, one of our, of course, is to create this awareness and to tell these is the players on the market so people can work together. I think that's, of course, one of our ground pillar why we exist. So it's just great to see.
Fantastic. So over to Norway, Henrik.
Thank you very much for that as well. Well, the general feeling is that in Norway now is that the funding is really taking off. So I was starting to highlight all these mid-sized deals, but there was just too long of a list of companies raising 1 million to 10 million NOK. Has just taken off, and a lot of these startups have really gained traction. You see, for example, Pi Labs going into layout now, coming to Norway. They just started out with the Antler program a year ago, and a great product, which raised interest from international VCs, and then there's actually big competition to invest in these kind of new startups as well. So I think that's a big change in this market, really. And as I said, even the lawyers need to pitch, and that's interesting because when, for example, I tried to help Spacemaker out in the early days, and like the law firms that I worked in were not very eager to kind of do that because it was high risk and low direct payout. But now you see a lot of the law firms also try to pitch to these smaller startups, and I think that's a healthy sign because that means actually there's like the business side in general are interested in the startups in a much bigger way than they were only a few years ago. And you see Oslo, there was a big survey that rated Oslo as the 3rd smartest city in the world. I think it can be symptomatic of a lot of the companies are using this smart building tech and smart city systems in Oslo, and there's a big kind of a testing ground for new technologies. And you see the technology that now are doing well in the Norwegian market are ESG products, as you mentioned. We don't have to go more into that, like things with help with the environmental effect, and also everything that has been important in the COVID, under the COVID. For example, Airthings, expanding east. They are their $1 billion targets, even though the prices of the product that they are purchasing will go up. So I think there's a big interest in this product. You see also in the venture market, Norselab started a venture debt company. That's never been done in Norway, at least here. Everyone invests in PropTech startups, but no one actually lends money to scale. And that's kind of interesting to see how that would go. And also if you talk about the governmental side, I think SINTEF, which is the research institute, they've now got 70 million NOK, about 10 million euros, to do research on building data and how you can share that. So I would say a lot of things going on. Just out of curiosity, we'll need a Norwegian company that does movable walls in the buildings. They were rated as the top 100 invention in Time magazine, and now they are also building big factories to produce their products. So this startup that we've known since the startup days are building actual production facilities. So that's just symptomatic of how it goes. And just the last point is, of course, Magnus has always been skeptical towards the kind of the one-stop shop, but I think a lot of the companies are trying to do that now with Loft, management platforms, or Vari. A lot of these companies are starting to talk together and are consolidating. So there's been a platform boom the last couple of years, and there cannot be that many platforms. So I think they are trying to consolidate at least their management tools going forward. That was the kind of the short story of Norway the past 3 months.
Great sum up. There's no question that there is a lot of startups in the ESG, especially reporting segment in Norway, that I've been quite impressed with. So I think Norway is very far ahead there. Talking about climate tech and so on, how about the home country of 2150, Denmark?
Thank you very much, Magnus. Yes, I will also talk a little bit about the ESG agenda. It's also boiling hot here, no surprise. But let's take it from the top here and talk about some of the deals and funding rounds. Looking at the numbers for 21 or last year, actually funding in total running into PropTech startups and scale-ups in Denmark doubled, going up from 24 million euros in 2020 to almost 50 million euro in 21. So still small numbers compared if we look at the fintech scene in Denmark, but you know, doubling I think is a really good sign. And I'm sure this year we will look into several Series A funding rounds in Denmark. Recent deals include Hokoko, a tenant experience platform that has raised 2.4 million euros to expand internationally. Entolabs, another promising Danish startups within the ESG agenda, making energy savings based on AI technology. They raised, and that's actually a pre-seed round, or it's the first investment at all, and they raised $3.6 million, which also says something about the ESG space. I think such a you can say early stage startup raising that much money, quite extraordinary in Denmark. Wise Home, also within the energy management, indoor climate, has raised 900,000 euro to expand in Denmark and the Nordics. And in general, I hear the same story from Sweden also. Roger mentioned a lot that the PropTech markets are maturing in the Nordics. That's also the case in Denmark, and we see it through an increase in acquisition and strategic partnerships. Some of them I've mentioned here. There are actually a lot more, but I think some of these are more remarkable. We have Boligportal, which actually is an old player in the PropTech space. It's a digital portal marketplace for rentals, and they have acquired a smaller PropTech player within the software property software space to become this more, you can say, all-inclusive platform for property management and rentals. The Many that was formerly called Brickshare. It's a crowdfunding platform for real estate, an investment platform. Actually, also one of the first players in the PropTech space in Denmark. Was acquired around a month ago by a selected group. Also a larger player in the alternative investment space. And then I think a very interesting case is Norwegian Unlock, that is quite active. One of the cool startups from Norway, which are really active in the Danish market also. And they entered has entered a strategic partnership with Unique Systems, which is the dominant property management software in Denmark. I think they sit on 80% of the property management software market in Denmark. An old player, and I just love to see this. It's a Nordic collaboration, and it's a really young, classical, venture-backed PropTech startup working together with one of these older players in the PropTech space, and they're working together in, of course, providing keyless access to apartments in all of Denmark. So I'm really happy to see that is going on. And I think it also shows that some of the older PropTech players here are also looking towards the new ones and see how can we make partnership with all the new players coming in. So positive about that. And then back to the ESG agenda, which is really boiling hot in Denmark. As you said, Magnus, 2150, a really large VC fund within the urban tech PropTech space, only focusing on climate solution. Closed their first fund and ending on $312 million US. And also very positive, they have a lot of the large real estate companies in the as LPs in their fund. I think that's also very positive. And then another, it's maybe a small story, but I think it's very good. It's very descriptive for what is happening both in the PropTech scene and the ESG agenda. We have this startup. It's called Legacy. It's one of the leading ones for making automated CO2 accountings for real estate. So it's specialized. Really, they're really good in real estate. But it's actually a really early stage startup. They just started, I think, a couple of years ago, and just went into the real estate markets almost, a half a year ago. And by the end of last year, and just in the beginning of the year, I think they've made deals with most of the majority of the large real estate players in Denmark in providing automated CO2 accounting, and also most of the pension funds. Also the largest, the Danish pension fund, ATP, which is a governmental pension fund. I think that's remarkable that such an early stage startup can go in and actually make deals with such established, really risk averse players. So that really says that the PropTech market is maturing, that the big players are also really looking into buying in on these solutions, even though that they're quite early stage. And of course, it also really highlights the ESG agenda and how hot it is. I would also say a last thing, that ESG, of course, it's mostly about the climate, the environmental right now, but I also see a really growing interest in Denmark about affordable housing. So all kind of new living concepts that plays into this, micro-living, student housing, co-living, and how technology can support our journey into more affordable housing, because that is an increasing problem, not only in Denmark. I know it's a global problem with affordable housing. So I really see that coming up as the next big agenda here in Denmark.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jakob, and everyone else. Yeah, it's no question that we need to highlight again. It seems that all the 4 markets in the Nordic region here is boiling with activities and deals and fundraising and adding a lot of customers. And also, luckily, I'm super happy with that, going both to the other Nordic countries and internationally. I think that's a really good sign. And for you who've been listening to this event previously, you recognize that we try to have a guest speaker, an external party on board to give their view of the market or their company. Last we had PropTech One from Germany that actually just after our webinar with them closed a new fund. So I see this as a good sign for all parties to listen in here. And I'm super happy to have one of the leading and sought after keynote speakers, Mr. James Dearsley from UK online. Welcome, James. Good to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here, actually. And do you know what? That was really, really insightful and really interesting from everybody. Because, and in fact, before, would you like me just to share my screen and go into the presentation, Magnus? Does that help? You can comment on the different countries, sum up, so to say, before you jump into your presentation. But when you have it, just go for it. You got to talk about
a survey you've done under the brand of Unissu.
Yeah, just, I mean, commenting on actually what everybody had said there. I think it's really interesting, and I'm seeing this all around the world, because over the last 18 months, there has obviously been a significant disruption to all industries, not just our own. And one of the things that I think I'm seeing, and Henrik, you mentioned it around the maturation of this space and larger deals happening. Jakob, you talked about the maturation of the space and this really growing. I actually think I always try to look a little bit further ahead than that. And I think you're right. I think the PropTech market has matured immensely. And what I'd like to do, let me just share my screen here for a second, because one of the things that we do as Unissu is, obviously we're a community-driven marketplace, and one of the things that we do is we work in partnerships with people all around the world. So we have global partnerships with PropTech associations, with not-for-profit organizations, with governments, with VCs and everything. And we just collate data in order for us to analyze the market. And we then give that data back to everybody. That's one of the things that we do, whether that be in the format which I'm just about to share with you, or some of you will have seen recently our Uniscore reports, which are there to educate an entire sector. And I'll touch on that in a minute. One of the things that I just want to pick up on everything that you guys have just said is around this aspect of funding. Funding seems to be what everybody pins to as success of a market. And I don't necessarily go along with that, but I do think it tells us some interesting things. So we all know, and if you look back over the last 10, 11 years, last year was the most successful year when it comes to VC funding. And that's not just in reality about the total amount that was raised. That was also, in terms of perhaps more importantly, things around the median average funding level, which was markedly higher than any other year that we've ever had when it comes to PropTech investment. Now, that absolutely, in my view, backs up everything that all of you were talking about with your local markets. And we're seeing this on a massively global level. And by the way, if ever any of you want to, you can actually have access into this. You can split down into countries if you want to, and you can really delve into that data. But I want to pick up on two things. Number one, the median funding is increasing, but number two, perhaps in my mind a little bit more interesting, is the number of funding events has obviously been dropping since that sort of peak around 2017 and 18. And it really dropped off a cliff last year, which is the reason why the median funding is so much higher. But this is where I want to pick up. I don't think that's the end of the story, because I think we're just about to move into the phase 2 of this long PropTech journey that we have all been on. A lot of us here on this call have been in the industry for a long time. I think last year was the year that we've seen peak maturation. And I do believe that back into 2022, we're going to see a lot more early stage companies coming in, which picks up a little bit, I think, Jakob, on what you just said, which is because of the whole COVID situation and other things, we've got new business models forming, which also means, and I could break this data down even more in terms of who is funding at what stage, and we can do that. And I know that in 2022, we're going to see a lot more early stage startups coming in. And to bring up again something on you said, Jakob, about you mentioned affordability. You're absolutely right. That's another key macro level impact that we're going to see on the market. And I actually break it down into 3 key things which are changing the way that PropTech needs to be viewed. And number one is the return to office, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later on. Number 2, Jakob, you mentioned it, affordability. It's a global problem that we've got. Number 3 is absolutely around the sustainability ESG models that we have. And what we're getting is a branch of PropTech that, because we are so central to the world of getting people back into offices and making sure that our carbon footprints are a lot better, that is why I think that we're moving into PropTech phase 2, which is having these macro impacts, which will start to completely, I think, upend these sorts of figures that we're starting to see. And I almost wouldn't be surprised, actually, if the amount we raise might dip down this year, because we're going to get many more deals coming through. I could be wrong. We'll see what happens at the end of the year. But anyway, sorry, Magnus, I got on a soapbox, and I really
very good summary and a more global view. There are a few people that have more global view than you and your colleagues at Unissu.
Hopefully. Okay, so shall I just jump in and just talk a little bit about the survey that we've been running?
Yes, Please do.
Okay, cool. So let me just jump in. And can you just confirm that you can see the slideshow that's just started here? Is that showing
yes, it's
okay?
good.
Perfect.
Yep.
So, like I said, one of the things that really we do at Unissu is all around procurement. So on one side, we help PropTechs basically get themselves branded. And I think it was Tasha, you talked about the excitement of the Finnish companies that are globalizing. That's what we try and do, is help the PropTechs understand the market and help them globalize. On the other side, we have the property industry genuinely trying to understand the market, and they do get a little bit confused. So one of the things that we wanted to try and do is to understand the real innovators in the market. So I hope that this small presentation is going to give you a little bit more of an insight in terms of the stage that the property industry is at. And these are just preliminary findings. So this is about a survey of about 60 people. We've now got partnerships with a load of organizations globally, which will be expanding this out to their members to get more data coming back in. But we do feel that some of the data findings we've got are quite representative of the industry where we are. Now, the most important thing from a PropTech perspective is understanding who your customer is. And I think that's a really difficult thing to do at the moment for any PropTech company to say, well, our customer is this sort of person. Because one of the things that we found when surveying these people is there is absolutely no consistency on the job titles of the sorts of people that are implementing technology. So you're going in here anything from, you know, what you'd expect, perhaps an innovation manager or a PropTech lead down here, or business innovation, through to a CEO or a property services commissioner, global head of property supply chain. There is no defined job title, which makes it challenging for a PropTech company to understand. So let me just look at the innovation strategy when it comes to sort of company level feelings. What we found is really the property industry is only now starting to get going in terms of developing an innovation strategy. So it's not even 40% of companies are at the point of having a strategy which is correct. What we then got is another 40% who are only now starting to execute that strategy. And despite all of this, we've got nearly 80% of all of those companies being absolutely committed to an innovation strategy, which I'll come back to in a little bit more detail later on, because it's an important point. So when you start looking at what that strategy means, there's always a really important aspect of understanding how PropTech works into a strategy. And we looked at whether or not, does this mean that they're going to invest? Are they going to build, or are they going to buy? And really what was quite universally found was, in terms of wanting to invest in a fund, and we do see a lot of the larger corporates thinking about doing that, that's where Fifth Wall comes in. I think someone mentioned Pi Labs or Metaprop or anything. That's not a significant factor, nor is it that they feel confident enough to actually invest in PropTechs directly. But what is definitely apparent and what we're seeing is around the build and the buy. So there does seem to be an awful lot of the industry who are considering actually building their own PropTech solution. And we met with at least 2 people yesterday who completely validated this perspective. And it does seem to me to be quite a traditional perspective, which is we can just build this because we know what the problem is. And there is going to be a challenge, I think, from the property industry side, which is this isn't just about building one technology solution to solve some of the challenges. They're going to have to be building, and you'll see data in a minute, between 2 and 5 solutions in the short term. So I think this is a very a perhaps slightly naive perspective to we're going to build. But what definitely is apparent is the property industry is interested in buying solutions. And I've actually extrapolated out this section here because a significant part of that no or unsure was definitely at the perspective of we just don't know yet. And that is partly because of this question back here, which is about we're developing strategy as we speak. So my message to the PropTechs here is recognize that part of the education you're going to have to deliver to the industry is about do they or should they be building something when actually they could look at essentially buying PropTech solutions and put that into the strategy. So it's a really important educative piece that everybody around the world is going to have to battle with. When it comes to those PropTech solutions, what's really interesting is just how many solutions they're looking for. And obviously being a procurement platform and that being our major focus, this is something which is important to us as a business model to understand. And we found that they're looking to buy between 2 and 5 PropTech solutions. So there's a lot of room here for movement, and especially when you start getting up to this area as well. So there's a lot of movement here. Talking about innovation teams within property companies, quite interestingly, these teams are generally, they're quite small. So 20%, there's only 1 person, 50% are generally between 2 and 5 people. And what is interesting again for us is 33% of those companies that we actually surveyed are using external consultants. And we found that that is starting to drop down. Many more people are looking at this side, which is growing their innovation teams internally. And I believe that's a really important perspective again, and it's a really good use of time by the property companies to actually enhance the knowledge and the capital knowledge of their individual employees internally. So again, remember that these companies are developing strategies, but they all feel confident enough that they're going to be growing their innovation teams over the next 12 months. Trying to understand a little bit more about the actual individual innovators themselves, remember that a lot of these people, nearly 50% of them, have only been in post for not even 2 years yet, with nearly 75% being in position not even for 5 years. So these are young roles. Equally, they have a massively important role in terms of reporting lines. They are all reporting into a CEO, or at least 50% in this case. So they have a lot of responsibility. But interestingly, there is a sort of a bit of a split in terms of, are these innovating people managing, or are they actually on the decision process? But ultimately, what we are seeing is that they have a considerable amount of responsibility, a considerable reporting line. However, they are drastically underpaid for what they do. They have responsibility in reporting lines, but 1/3 of them are being paid less than $100,000. And a lot of that, and this is perhaps something which, again, if you're going to approach these companies, you need to realize, a lot of these people in innovating roles are generally what we would call part-time digital gurus, and they are the ones sticking up their hands and saying, I'd like to take on an innovator's role. And therefore, they're essentially being paid for their original property job with innovation on top of that, rather than what we're starting to see, which is companies going outside of the property industry to actually recruit digital transformation or change leaders. And therefore, what we're hoping to see is actually the sort of the salaries that the property companies are going to be getting is much, much, much higher. Moving that forward, a really important point is an understanding that the people who are working in innovation generally are massively, massively under-resourced in terms of time. Despite, as you saw earlier, the seriousness that these companies are taking in terms of their innovation strategy, over half of the people that we surveyed do not spend more than 50% of their time on that innovation role that they have. And this is something that we know the property industry is going to have to adapt to and change if it is genuinely going to be serious about working with the PropTech companies which are out there. I'm just going to skip that one, so I'm just going to go very quickly into the 5 or 6 observations that we had, just to sort of finish this and conclude this presentation. Number 1, there is no consistency around job titles, and we absolutely are calling for the industry to make sure that innovation, change, digital transformation, or technology is added into these business roles, so it's easier for them to justify their own role. Number 2, roles in innovation need to sit within that change and transformation side, not necessarily on a technology or an IT company. And that is really important when it comes to pushing of the salaries, because really it's only when you start pushing on change and transformation roles that you start to see the much higher salaries and the much more sort of serious nature of these roles. And that is something that we feel the industry needs to take very seriously. Observation 4, really importantly, is we're seeing that the change and transformation is now being done largely in-house and sort of retaining that knowledge in-house, and it really shouldn't really be sort of deployed outside of the company. You want to retain that knowledge in-house. And importantly, this move to not necessarily always invest in PropTech funds is also a good thing, because the moment that every single company is starting to invest in the same funds, you have no sustainable competitive advantage between all these big global companies if they're just investing their innovation strategy in globalized funds, because everybody's doing it. So it's important to have that distinction outside. Last couple, innovation is not a part-time role. You as a prop tech person, if you are on this call, have to understand it's a part-time role, but it shouldn't be. And we're hoping over time it will develop. And the most important thing from the property industry is ultimately understanding that the foundations have been laid. The industry is changing. All of you have mentioned before on this call that the industry is maturing. I'm going to absolutely tell you that the real estate attitude is maturing and changing, and they're taking it more seriously. And that is also in a very flippant comment that we put to some property people yesterday. Change and digital transformation should not necessarily be run by IT leaders. They should be run by the CEOs, the boards, and ultimately the people who are genuinely interested in changing the business model and changing everything that's coming around. So without further ado, that is my, hopefully, an interesting take in terms of the property industry and attitude to innovators. If any of you are on this call are what I would term as an innovator in the property industry, not the prop tech, please do go to this link here, and I'll put it in the chat in a minute, and help us understand the Nordics, because one of the things we're really looking to do is to say, how do the Nordics compare to Eastern Europe, compared to Australia? So any help and support in that sense would be absolutely fantastic. There you go. Thanks, Magnus. I hope that was interesting and I didn't talk for too long.
Fantastic, James. Super interesting material you have there. There's no question about it. Time flies, but I need to have two questions. I think one, being based in UK but traveling globally before the pandemic and nowadays more online, how would you say, I mean, not just regarding this survey, but in general, how do you think the global arena views Nordic startups or Nordic PropTech suppliers?
So
how do you think the global market view the Nordic PropTech companies in general?
It's really interesting. I think that the Nordic PropTech scene is one that is felt as very exciting. I think, being brutally honest, I'm not sure many people necessarily understand it. I think they almost group all of you together with a natural assumption that you're all one thing. I think, well, my personal opinion is that the Nordic industry punches well above its weight. And I think it's a very vocal community, which is a very positive feature. I don't think that people understand, you know, for example, we talked about Jakob and Denmark being incredibly powerful around ESG and sustainability. I don't think you differentiate the countries well enough to really shout out about why is, in your case, Roger, why is Sweden really fantastic? What is the core strength of the Swedish market? But I think generally it is, the scene is well respected. I think people recognize that, yeah, you punch above your weight. There's absolutely no doubt. But the one, I would say one thing. I would like to see more of what Tasha talked about, which was the globalization of the Finnish companies in her stead. I think that one of the massive advantages of the Nordic scene is your English and your ability to translate your technologies in the Nordic market. I think you need to encourage more of these companies to get outside of the Nordics. And I think you have a fantastic opportunity, whereas I don't think the German market necessarily has as much of an opportunity. I don't think the French market has necessarily much of opportunity, because I think they are much more insular in their market. Whereas I would like to challenge the Nordic companies to think much more like the Australian companies do, for example. Anyone who builds something in Australia, just because of where Australia is in the map, I think, they naturally think about exporting their technology and getting out of Australia really quickly. I would encourage the Nordic community to do exactly that and really think about export sooner rather than later.
Very good, very good. I think that's, I for sure share the same opinions like you, James, on that topic, and that's one of the reasons why we started the Nordic PropTech Initiative, just to show both local startups up here in the Nordics that where they should go and can go, and by giving examples, and also show the global audience what is happening up here and give some thoughts about where to start. So time is running. We have 3 minutes, but I think we go over 5 minutes, because let's go around the table from each country now and present what's happening when it comes to events and maybe awards. So maybe we should start with the award you guys are running. Should be Jakob, or who should take it?
Yes, I can take that. Thank you very much. Nordic PropTech Awards has been running, started it out last year with the initial nomination round, and then we had the semifinals, online pitch sessions here in the beginning of January. And on the 4th of March, we will announce the winners of Nordic PropTech Awards. There'll be as I said, an online virtual event, which you all can follow. So please save the date on the 4th of March. We're very much looking forward to announce the winners of this. We have had really positive feedback on the award, so it's really been, I think, a good stepping stone for many of the promising Nordic startups to get some visibility, and also the ability to pitch for really truly Nordic juries.
Perfect, Jakob. And while you're there is another event.
Yes, then there's another event
in Copenhagen. So
yes,
I assume you're
actually
more involved.
yes, a very exciting one. We're collaborating with Cretech that has really put its eyes on the climate challenge, and for that they're will have in the future these climate summits, and the first one will be in Copenhagen on May the 17th to the 19th. So really hope to see many of you there. And I can also reveal that our big annual symposium will be the 16th of May. That'll say the day before. So that'll be another reason to go to Copenhagen.
Perfect.
So really looking forward to see you in mid of May, all of you in Copenhagen.
No, I really hope the global audience take the opportunity to go to Copenhagen in person, yes, or join online, because I think there's so many good examples from the ESG and environment perspective up here in the Nordics. There's no question about it. We have some very large listed companies that has decreased the carbon impact tremendously. So there's so many good stories to be shared.
Just the last word, Magnus, on our symposium, because actually we are really, last year, of course, we had international speakers, but this year we are really trying to make it more international and more Nordic. So there will be plenty of Nordic keynote speakers, Nordic panelists from the different Nordic countries. So we are really trying to make this a Nordic event. I think that also gives more reason to gather here in Copenhagen.
Fantastic. And from the other, so let's start with Norway. What is happening on the association level, so to say?
Well, I feel excluded from this event as it starts on the 17th of May, which is the national day here in Norway. So that's kind of a holiday that there's no way of skipping. But the 18th of May, a little hangover, perhaps, will come down there. On the other note, we have a lot of media and a lot of things going on. We have started our podcast with the state media, and we have also launched a breakfast concept. So if you're in Oslo, you can join for the PropTech breakfasts down at the Mesh in the middle of Oslo. And then we're doing a huge event in September, 15th of September. Then you have to come to Oslo. We have together with Entra, which is one of the largest real estate companies in Norway, and OMA, Oslo Metropolitan Area, Oslo Urban Week. We have a huge happening at Rebel, which is a co-working space in Oslo with hundreds and almost, hopefully thousands of people are coming. So that's going to be the end of the Oslo Urban Week. So 15th of September, come to Oslo.
Fantastic. And let's start with next station, Sweden.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks James for that. We're having a webinar next Friday where we're going to launch our marketing activity calendar for the whole year. So we planned in, and that's a lot in that. So I just told Johanna, our marketing, to put in the climate also in Copenhagen, the 15th and 17th. We have that. In general, we will launch. We launched in December the world first PropTech Championship. So today we will launch who went to the next stage. So that will be very exciting. It's really good pitches, it's amazing pitches around Europe. So it's really, really cool. And that's a great initiative from Skanska. And we're having the PropTech Championship final the 25th of March, so the week after MIPIM. And so join us next week, the 11th, to see the market calendar and see you in MIPIM.
Fantastic. So Tasha, what is happening in Finland?
We have one big news which we will announce in a couple of months. We will have 10 forerunner companies supporting our association. It's very nice to see the corporate sector finally seeing the value in what we do. We did Recatech as a face-to-face event despite the pandemic situation. Now finally, I hope by the mid of February, Finland will have no restrictions, and we are planning lots of community events, still on a little bit smaller scale, but maybe something big in summer. Summer is beautiful, so we need to use that season, not only November, which is the best month, of course.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward going back to the Recatech combination with Slush in November in Helsinki. It's really, if you're doing anything in tech, you really should visit Slush at least
you
once.
can already mark the dates. We have the next Slush date soon, so
yeah,
it will be announced.
Amazing tech event, a general tech event, and time is flying. We have run over with 3 or 4 minutes.
Can I just add one thing, Magnus?
Jakob, you're more than welcome.
It's because Roger mentioned MIPIM, and also to say that the Nordic PropTech Award winners will actually get direct access to pitch at the MIPIM startup competition. So there you'll also be able to meet Nordic PropTech startups. We're really happy about that. And I know, I think Roger is going. I know Tasha is going to MIPIM, and PropTech Denmark is also going to MIPIM. So there you can also meet us.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, I will not go to MIPIM. I've been there 17 times, and I really like the event, and it's great. But you need to go there with a very clear perspective on what you want to gain, and the way I work nowadays in my new position is not as useful. So I will not go there this year. But it's a lovely event for sure, and I hope they come back to how it was before the pandemic struck. Anyway. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you for all panelists, and obviously also James calling in from UK. Thank you very much, and really good insights. And like mentioned in the chat and in the invitation, this event has been recorded and will be shared, but I will wait roughly 10 days since I want to encourage live participation. So it will be there, and we will send the links and the events and so on in an email to everyone. So take care, have a good Friday, and enjoy the weekend. Thank you so much, and we see you in around 3 months. Bye.
Thank you, Magnus.